Hi, welcome back to our Windows Server 2016 course. What is new? So far, we have covered the following modules: Introduction, Platform Vision, Management, Security, Identity and Access, Storage, Networking, and Compute is our last part. Under Compute, we have spoken earlier, the earlier videos around nano servers and containers. We covered all these more like scenarios, installation, update, management. For today, we will be talking about failover cluster, and we have 7 topics: cluster rolling upgrade, mix OS cluster, witness, cloud witness, AD independent cluster improvement, STD Direct, new resilience features, CSV Cache Enhancement, and shared virtual hard disk resizing. Now, there is a new improvement on the Server 2016. It's called Cluster OS Rolling Upgrade. Is a new feature in Server 2016 that enable administrator to seamlessly upgrade the operating system of nodes in failover cluster from 2012 R2 to 2016. When a rolling upgrade of a cluster takes place, there will be a temporary mixture of Windows 2012 and host and Windows 2016 host. Using this feature, the downtime penalty against service level agreement SLA can be avoided for Hyper-V or for scale-out file server workload. It is a really good improvement, which means no more downtime, and you can utilize that, time to coexist, and you can decide when to migrate. Now, before I move on to the next part, let me just give you some info about how that will work. You will have 2012 environment, and then you have the option to introduce 2016 node into your cluster. They can coexist. Microsoft will recommend up to 4 weeks they can coexist. And then if you are happy with the 2016 node, then you can evict the 2012 and keep all the nodes 2016. If you are happy with everything, you can convert the template into the highest template or the highest cluster template, which is version 9. If you are not happy with this one, you can introduce the 2012 and evict the 2016 due to any issue you came across. But if you decided to convert to the upper version, which means you can't roll back to the earlier version. It is really only available between 2012 R2 to 2016. Earlier, they cannot benefit from that zero downtime cloud upgrade for Hyper-V scale-out. Next is the improvement is the cloud witness. Uses Azure Blob Storage in cloud as witness in Quorum for storage cluster. Recommended configuration. Cloud witness enable us to use the Quorum for storage cluster. Cluster witness can now be a disk witness, file share witness, or cloud witness. This feature allows customers to use Azure as a third data center hosting the cloud witness without set up a maintenance overhead associated with running up a file share witness on a VM. Next, AD independent cluster improvement. Cluster can now be deployed independent of a domain topology. Clusters with all nodes in the same domain, clusters with nodes in different domain, clusters with nodes which are member servers work group, not domain joined, and fewer dependency result in increased availability. Cluster infrastructure switched over using certificate. So for the work, just to recap here, clarify, for the work group, we can secure via certificate. AD independent cluster provide the ability to deploy failover cluster with less dependency on Active Directory domain services. With Windows 2012 R2, the Active Directory detached cluster feature allows having cluster with the name not attached to AD. With 2016, failover cluster can be deployed with workgroup and multiple domain. Failover cluster, storage space direct. As we explained earlier, we have three approaches. Uses local drive for storage and to duplicate across cluster node using storage replica, which we will discuss basically. And you can see stretch cluster, cluster to cluster, server to server. With S2D, enable service providers and enterprise environment to use industry standard server with local storage to build highly available and software so scalable defined software storage. Using server with local storage, decrease the complexity, increase the scalability, and enable use of storage device were not previously possible, simplifying deployment and configuration. Instead, it uses network storage fabric, leveraging SMB3 and SMB Direct RDMA for high speed and low latency storage. To scale out, simply add more servers to increase the storage capacity and the I/O performance. Storage Space Direct support both converged and hyper-converged deployment, enabling the choice of converge with storage and compute in separate tier for independent scale and management, and hyper-converge with compute and storage collected in the same servers. Health Service for Storage Space Direct. The Health Service is a new feature for Windows 2016 which significantly improve the day-to-day monitoring operation and maintenance experience of Storage Space Direct. The Health Service enabled by default. New CMD Lite make collection aggregated performance and capacity metrics simple and fast. Faults and health information bubble up to a single monitoring point per cluster. New inbox intelligence determines the root cause of fault to reduce chatness, understanding severity, and recommend next step. With S2D, it enables building highly available HA storage system for local storage. Cloud design, point and management, standard server, and local storage. And what value does this change or add? S2D enables service provider and enterprise to use industry standard server with local storage to build highly available, scalable, software-defined storage. Using server with local storage, decrease the complexity, increase the scalability, and enable use of storage devices that were not previously possible, such as SATA solid-state disk, to lower cost of flash storage or NVMe solid-state disk for better performance. So, a quick word around stretch cluster. This is everything's automated. It's a one cluster with a stretch depending on the nodes and distance and latency. Then we have cluster to cluster where we can fail over between two data centers, where we'll need 20% capacity across both to be active, or we can do server to server where we have to fail over only the critical server between the data centers. Other improvement around failover cluster, we have a new resiliency feature. It is site awareness. For stretch cluster, define grouping based on physical location. Failover to node in the same site, storage affinity, VMs below storage, and we have node fairness where we dynamically load balance the cluster. Windows Server 2016 introduced new feature to improve cluster resiliency, cluster quarantine, site awareness, and node fairness. The cluster quarantine prevents flapping node from negatively impacting other nodes and overall cluster health. Unhealthy nodes are prevented from joining the cluster for period of time. Once the quarantined VM hosted by the node are gracefully drained to healthy nodes. Site awareness, fault domain with failure, and placement policies with which are aware and optimized for physical location of stretch cluster across sites. Node fairness: identify idle node in a cluster and distribute virtual machine to utilize them. CSV Cache Enhancement: CSV Cache provide a write-through cache for unbuffered I/O, which significantly boosts virtual machine performance. Scalability improvement to increase the amount of memory that can be allocated to a CSV cache. The CSV cache with Windows 2016 also has interoperability enhancements such as being compatible with tiered storage space and deduplication. Write-through cache for unbuffered I/O boosts VM performance, scalable improvement, and can be allocated as CSV cache and compatible with the tiered storage. Shared virtual hard. VHDX resize with no downtime. Guest cluster shared VHDX protected by Hyper-V replica for disaster recovery. Guest cluster can be both host level and guest backup of the shared disk. Shared virtual hard disk resizing. You can now resize shared virtual hard disk VHDX used for the guest cluster without downtime. Shared virtual hard disk can be grown or shrunk while the virtual machine is online. Guest cluster can now also protect shared virtual disk by using Hyper-V replica for DR. Shared virtual disk resizing with no downtime. A shared virtual disk enable guest cluster virtual machine by using virtual hard disk shared VHD. With Windows 2012, Microsoft introduced a new feature to Hyper-V called Shared VHDX, which allows to attach a virtual disk to multiple VMs to build guest cluster. But in 2012, R2 had some missing features such as missing host-based backup for shared VHDX file or online resizing for shared VHDX file. In 2016, Microsoft is working hard to bring the missing pieces together. Online resizing, support for Hyper-V replica, host-based backup, and some scalability changes. Nano server is supported for the using in cluster nodes, including essential cluster, present IP address, network name, distribute network name, IPv6, and physical disk, storage pool, task schedules, virtual machine configuration, and replication. Features are still missing or not available: file server, file shares witness, generic application, all the way down to WinService and ASCII target. This is what I had for you for today. Hopefully you have learned something useful. Let's recap what we just covered today. We spoke about failover cluster and we went through the major improvement around failover cluster. So first one was roll up upgrade, and we said that one's only available for 2012 R2 2016, which means zero downtime. No need to drain, no need to stop the service. Basically, you introduce the node 2016 to an existing 2012. They can coexist, and during coexistence, you can basically decide to keep or evict. If you decide to keep them, then you need to convert the templates or cluster template to the highest template, which is version 9 for 2016. Otherwise, during the coexistence, they can be V8, which means 2012. Until then, you have the choice to either move up or stay. But if you convert to the highest version, which means you cannot go back, you have to do restore or other methods. Then we spoke about other improvements. We mentioned new clusters. Now with volume replication, you can do more than 4 terabyte. There are some nice improvements around scale-up file protocol and resilient file protocol, larger image sizes, larger supported basically naming convention, more than 255, and self-healing. And then we spoke about other improvement around AD. We said it's supporting same domain, different domain, cluster, non-domain joined, workshop, Oracle place, and we said we can secure by certificate. And then we spoke about the stretch clusters, cluster to cluster, and server to server scenarios where you can replicate or failover, depend on your requirement. And then the last part, we spoke about the other improvement around resiliency, and we spoke about node fairness and we spoke about sort of load balancing between it, and then we spoke about a new improvement around shared virtual disk and how Microsoft improved this from 2012 to allow us to resizing on the fly and adding and monitoring. Also, we spoke about nano server support, what is currently present and what is missing under the nano servers. That was all what I had for you today. Hopefully you have learned something useful, and that's all. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.